KFR Talk, 888-589-8840 is the number to call, 888-589-8840 if you'd like to join the conversation. I mentioned Mitt Romney's true tax rate, this Tax Prof blog. The Tax Prof says his true tax rate at the federal level is 44.75% when you take into consideration the double taxation, the fact that before Mitt Romney ever saw a dollar of earned income, the corporation for which he worked had already been taxed at 35%, and he's in charge of the corporation, so that's basically his money, his investors' money, already been taxed once at 35%. Then he gets the money, he declares it income, he pays 35% on that, so it's already been double taxed before he ever starts getting dividends on the money that he earned, so it gets taxed a third time. And so the Tax Prof says his true tax rate about 44.75%. And a guy that writes under the name John Galt writes that when you add in to Mitt Romney's tax burden, state income tax and sales tax, his true tax burden is somewhere between 55 and 56%. So folks in Mitt Romney's tax bracket, in other words, are paying their fair share. Now let's grab a couple of more sound bites. Again, 888-589-8840 if you'd like to join the program. And Michael Reagan saying, look, what the Republicans are going to probably go for is they'll get duped, just like Ronald Reagan was. Look, my dad got duped on this. My dad got played for a chump on this. He accepted a promise for tax cuts down the road in exchange for tax increases right now. So he gave them the tax increases. Sure enough, those went into effect. The tax cuts never happened. He said, my dad was waiting for those tax cuts till the day he died. And then George H.W. Bush, read my lips, no new taxes. Then he gets played for a sucker, gets played for a chump. And the Democrats say, look, we'll give you 2 for 1. We'll promise you $2 in spending cuts for every dollar in increased taxes. He went for it. The $2 in spending cuts never came. The dollar in tax increases went into effect, and he was out of a job 2 years later. That is after having an approval rate that was just sky high after Operation Desert Storm. So Michael Reagan said, look, to these Republicans, don't let them play you for suckers. It's been done before. If they fooled Ronald Reagan and he regretted it, then learn from his experience. Don't make the same mistake that he made. Now, let's play clip 4. This is Piers Morgan. Then we'll go to the phones, 888-589-8840. Piers Morgan had Reince Priebus on, and he's trying to the left is trying to hector these Republicans now into abandoning their principle and raising taxes. Here's how their exchange went.
So clearly the Republicans are being predominantly blamed for the breakdown in bipartisanship in Washington. The fiscal cliff is a classic opportunity, many would argue, to show the Americans you've listened, you've changed, you're ready to do deals that are to the benefit of the American national interest. But you Republicans, led by Grover Norquist, are absolutely intransigent about allowing any raise in taxation. And yet the American public want you to do it.
So that's Piers Morgan getting after Republicans for standing on principle. It's interesting to watch. And Rob, if we can grab clip 17, let's get that one ready to go, that Steve Kornacki clip, if we've got that. The liberal media, when a liberal stands on principle, they commend it. This is wonderful. This is remarkable. This is statesmanship. It's boldness and courage. When Republicans stand on principle, they're stubborn, they're evil, they're wicked, they don't care. Here's Steve Kornacki of Salon Magazine talking about Chris Van Hollen, just extolling his virtue as a courageous man of principle while dumping all over the Republicans for sticking to their principles. Let's listen.
Could I just, I don't mean to interrupt the conversation here, but I think it's important to point out what's impressed me about this isn't that the idea was floated, it's how quickly top Democrats reacted. I'm thinking of Chris Van Hollen, one of the top Democrats in the House, who came right out and said, we are open to this idea, but only if the bottom line is first met, and that is raising the income tax rates on the wealthy. Then we could talk about deductions on top of that. So I think what struck me here is the Democrats are adamant that they are not going to let that issue of the Bush Bush tax cuts go, and they're not going to have any substitutes. They're not going to accept any substitutes at this point. Dan, and that's the point. I mean, Republican leaders and some Republican thought leaders might be coming around to the conclusion that, hey, we've got to deal with revenues here. But the reason for this intransigence from Republicans, really for the past 2 decades, can be traced back to 1990. It was when George Bush Sr. put a tax hike deal together with Democrats. What we found out then was within the Republican Party and on the right, there is a huge opening for would-be and for aspiring conservative leaders, whether it's on talk radio, whether it's backbenchers in the House, whether it's in the Senate, to stand up and say, I'm not going to be part of this unconscionable salad of conservative principles. I'm going to fight the establishment. That is how Newt Gingrich became the top Republican in the House. And it seems to me if you go down that road again, if McConnell, if Boehner, if these guys sign off on a deal, there's a huge opening for the Newt Gingrich of this generation. I don't know who it is, but to stand up and say, I'm fighting, yeah, it could be Paul Ryan. I mean, it seems like there's a huge opening there for a revolt on the right.
So huge opening for revolt on the right. These wascally Republicans sticking to their principles. That's intransigence. That's just a big word for being stubborn and bullheaded. Meanwhile, when Democrats stand for their principle to increase taxes, that is impressive. Let's go to the phones. Let's go to, let's go to Dave Rowell in Richardson, Texas. Can we bring him in? Okay, we got Rowell in Richardson, Texas, or do I need... Okay, let's see what we can do here. Okay, let's see. Now we got it. Yeah, Rowell in Richardson, Texas. Welcome to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. What's on your mind?
Hi, Brian. It is Rowell.
Okay, great.
I called to talk about the cruise, but, the deal with the politicians, I wish they would keep it in their mind that it's not their money, it is our money. But... that's the frustrating part about it.
I know it. Well, and you listen to them, Rowell, and it's like they feel that they have the right to tell us how much of our money we get to keep, as if it's their money. They have a right to all of it, and the way they're showing their generosity toward us is by allowing us to keep just a little bit of the money that we've earned.
Brian, the unfortunate part about it is we keep letting them have that mindset. So
yeah,
that's the really unfortunate part. Now, on the cruise lines, the unfortunate part about the cruise lines is my sister and I found out with a situation. My mother was on a cruise, and probably due to a great deal of negligence, she ended up passing away. And when we spoke with the lawyer about possibly bringing suit, he said, you can do it, but it's just throwing money in a rat hole. There's a reason why the cruise lines flag their ships out of other countries because it makes it incredibly difficult to sue.
That's interesting, huh? So they're out of the reach of American law then, and of course most of the time they're in international waters, so maybe whatever happens out there, they can't be prosecuted in the American court for it.
Well, it makes it very difficult to take them to court. So.
All right, that's intriguing. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, that's pretty shrewd on their part, way to avoid moral and legal culpability for misdeeds. All right, Raul, thank you for the phone call. Appreciate that. Let's go to David, Jacksonville, Florida. Can we bring David in? David, welcome to Focal Point. What's on your mind?
First of all, I'd like to say I really appreciate the show you do. Finally get to hear somebody who actually tells the truth as it is and is not afraid of the biased media.
Well, thank you.
And secondly, I am a truck driver, and my job, more than others, is directly affected by the fuel prices. And the only thing I can come to a conclusion to on the whole fiscal cliff and the way rates are going and the way the economy is running and the way they're trying to tax everybody is it's just a thought, but maybe, it goes back to the whole socialist idea. If you have the rich in power and you phase out the middle class because they tax them so much they have no choice but to be the poor, when you phase out the middle class, it was the most dangerous to a left-wing liberal economy because we work for a living, we don't depend on them. But if we get taxed to the point where we break, then we have to depend on them. Then you have just the poor and the rich. And the rich control the poor. That is called communism, in my opinion. And I would like your opinion on that as far as that's concerned. And thank you for taking my call.
All right, David, you're welcome. And, I think, let me put this as baldly as I can. I believe that socialists, communists, if you listen to Pravda, like Barack Obama, They have a vested interest in keeping as many Americans as poor as possible. They want Americans poor. They don't want Americans to succeed. You'll hear Barack Obama bloviating endlessly about the middle class. We got to have the middle class. Middle class is important. We're not doing well unless the middle class is doing well. But all of his policies are making it harder and harder and harder for the middle class to succeed and prosper and thrive. And I think the reality is he doesn't want people to prosper and thrive because then they become independent. They become self-reliant. They no longer need the Democrats. They no longer need the socialists. They no longer need the communists. They no longer need the government handouts. They can stand alone. They can stand on their own. And that's the thing they cannot have. You know, one of the things I've been monitoring is the explosion in student debt. I mean, it is absolutely out of control. It's higher now than credit card debt, and delinquencies on student loans are now outpacing delinquencies on credit card debt. And you can't absolve yourself of a student loan by going through bankruptcy. The law doesn't let you do it. And I'm sure that's going to change. But the next thing we're going to have is this big bailout, I'm sure, this push from Barack Obama. But we're looking at these college degrees. They're increasingly worthless. You can't get a decent job. You know, more than half of college graduates are living at home in the basement with their room they grew up in with their parents because they can't find a job that enables them to get out and get established and on their own. And I think President Obama loves this. I mean, he eats this up. So he encouraged, you got to go to college to get a good job. So they run up this huge amount of student debt just being funneled to them. There's virtually no standards. You hardly have to do anything to qualify for a student loan. There's a limit of $57,000, but a lot of students are running the debt up to $56,000, $57,000, no way to repay it. And President Obama's got them right where he wants them, poor, destitute, helplessly dependent on the good graces of the federal government. So I think President Obama actually enjoys it when students get a worthless degree, get hopelessly in debt, cannot find a job because he's got them right where he wants them, helplessly, hopelessly, slavishly dependent upon government handouts. Focal Point AFR Talk will be right back after the news. Stay with us.
American Family Radio.